He sat in the smoke-filled basement room at his custom bar. A cigarette burned between his fingers, and a nearly empty bottle of whiskey sat upon the bar, dancing the last little residual waves after having been poured. Two items of note, ever-present companions on these nights, sat in front of him. To his left sat a fully loaded .357 revolver. To his right sat a shot glass of whiskey. He took a drag on the cigarette, blew out a cloud of smoke into the dimly lit basement, picked up the glass and threw the shot back into his mouth. He swallowed hard and quickly poured another shot. This was every night of his life these days. He'd drink himself down to the bottom of the bottle, stroking the pistol to see if he'd get the nerve to do it before passing out. He wasn't always like this, of course. Every man can be brought low for his various reasons. Him? He reasoned he was living on borrowed time as it was, and what a hell of a loan it had been. His fingers danced their little dance over the revolver, then back once more to the glass. He picked it up, put the glass to his mouth, and took down another shot. Quickly it was refilled. He stroked the gun a bit, and began to work up the nerve. He'd planned it ever since that day. He lifted the revolver up, feeling its weight in his hand. It was heavier than he'd expected. It always was. He knew the day he had the guts to go through with it, the weight wouldn't bother him so much. It would be a quick trip into his mouth, do its work, and that would be the end of it. He set it down and took another belt of that whiskey. His head was swimming. It was that time of the night, deep in a drunken fog, that the visions always came back to torment him. Sliding his finger ever so casually between the revolver and the drink, his cloudy thoughts returned to the day. She drove that day. She did most of the time, really. That was usually just the way it worked out. She drove, he was in the front, and their daughter sat in her car seat in the back. He hated these memories of happier times. He pounded another drink down, hoping to make them go away, but all it did was give him a more tenuous grasp on the conscious. Nothing could stop him from reliving it. All over in his mind, that brat teen bitch slammed her SUV into their little sedan, sending it careening around the freeway. He was sure they must have hit a dozen other things along the way, but his memories of it were simply of the screech of metal on pavement, the deafening bangs as the vehicle hit one thing after another, and a field of view with the sky and pavement flipping in front of him like an old-time film projector starting up. When he gathered what few senses he had that day, he was laying in a pool of his own blood on the pavement. He didn't hurt, per se. That would come later, after the stages of shock wore off. He was aware of a deep gash in his midsection. That was all immaterial to him, though. He had to get to his wife and daughter. He dragged himself up and limped as quickly as he could, desperately scanning the disaster of a freeway. He found the car laying on its side, driver's side down, with smoke emerging from it. He hobbled toward it as fast as he could manage. He was aware of voices, certainly people around him, but he couldn't be bothered with them. A fire had started at the car, and he had to get his family out. He limped there, leaving a thick blood trail along the way. By the time he reached the vehicle, it was on its way to being engulfed in flame. He pulled himself ineptly up, searing flesh on the exhaust pipe, but he managed to pull himself up to the passenger side. He was not there long. In the short moments he was there, he saw the fire burning at the bodies of his wife and daughter, hair singed off, flesh charring like grilled meat. Once bright clothes a mess of ash and glowing ember. Though he tried to climb in through the window, he felt a force tearing him away. The bystanders pulled him away, refusing to allow him to burn in that vehicle, no matter who was to be saved. He pounded another shot. The paramedics later told him he'd been lucky to survive. His wife and daughter died, and on the inside so had he. True luck would have been if he'd been the one to go instead. He'd been most unfortunate to live, if you could call what he did any more living. He traced a lazy, uncoordinated figure eight around the firearm and the alcohol. It was no great story of justice or revenge, his little tale of woe. The girl had been texting, and the last thing through her head after the text was a chunk of her own windshield wiper. He didn't even have the satisfaction of screaming his head off at her in court. All he had were the scars, and the ones on the outside didn't have shit on the ones on the inside. He pounded a shot, barely able to set the glass upright at this point. He poured, only to see the glass filled by the last drops of the bottle. This was it, the penultimate moment of the night. Was it to be the blackout of the final drink, or a permanent end to his memories once and for all? His eyes drifted back and forth lazily, his finger waving stuporously along with them. Which would it be? The gun or the glass? He began to sway along with it all. Glass to gun, gun to glass. He felt so dead inside, like he did every night since the accident. Gun to glass, glass to gun. He'd been there, making this choice so many times before. Just another night, just another choice. He reached out, grabbed it, opened his mouth, and allowed oblivion to come.